So while the real estate agent is focusing on selling that new listing they just got, it's actually the listing coordinator who works super hard behind the scenes to make everything happen. I'm going to walk you step by step on what are the responsibilities of this key role in the real estate world, the listing coordinator. Hello and welcome back. My name is Cecilia Peralta. I am a virtual assistant, and in this channel, I share with you tips, tutorials, and industry insights to help virtual assistants become successful business owners. So the real estate agent normally goes to an appointment on site, visiting the property, and meet with the seller to discuss comps, prices, marketing strategies, and hopefully they will have a successful appointment and they will leave with the listing agreement signed. So at this point is when the job of an independent listing coordinator is going to start, right after the listing agreement is signed. And please note that I said independent listing coordinator. The reason why I make a distinction is because in some cases, the real estate agents, they do have in-house listing coordinators. And when they do, most likely their job is going to start way before they sign an agreement. Normally, an in-house listing coordinator will actually make sure that the listing agent has all the paperwork needed in order to go to the appointment. So they're going to create the listing agreements, they're going to create any other disclosures that might need to be presented to the seller at that time. And also, in most cases, they're going to make sure that the listing agent have ready the listing presentation. When you are not an in-house listing coordinator, but rather an independent one, your job, as I mentioned, starts after the listing agreement is signed. At this point, the agent is going to reach out to you, send you the information, complete your intake form, and you as a listing coordinator are going to start with the process. And the first thing that you're going to do is to make sure that that listing agreement is fully executed. As usual, if you are a friend of this channel, you know that the first thing that we need to do as listing coordinators or transaction coordinators is to review the documents. That is the very, very first step. In some cases, there are missing signatures or missing initials, and we think that we have a listing agreement, we think that we have a contract, and in reality, we do not. So that is the first step. You need to make sure that you are very, very carefully reviewing that listing agreement and make note of anything that might not be correct, that might not be signed. And if you need to make any changes, obviously you will go ahead and take care of that with the approval of the listing agent. Also, there are many different disclosures based on the state that you work and also based on the brokerage you work for or your agent work for. That will be also part of reviewing the documents. And I'm going to be very honest, in most of the cases, the listing agent's only going to give you the bare minimum, which is the listing agreement. And then you will have to gather the rest of the documentation and get it signed by the seller. Once that the listing coordinator review all the documentation and have a clear understanding of what is missing, then the next step will be calling the seller to introduce yourself as a listing coordinator to make sure that they understand what's your role in this transaction, and also to let them know that they're going to receive some documents to sign, and those documents are time sensitive. Once that the seller signs every single document and disclosure that is needed, then it's time for you to upload these documents for broker compliance. You will also use the disclosures to be uploaded to the MLS, so the buyer's agent, when presented an offer, they can just grab these documents and send the whole package together. So talking about the MLS, the listing coordinator will have to input this listing on the MLS. And in order to do so, the listing coordinator will need to have access to this listing agent MLS. And there's a way to do it correctly, which is not to grab the listing agent password and user ID. That is a no-go, at least for the MLS I use. The MLS actually give an option so the listing agents can have assistants, so they can have their own login and do this type of work on their behalf. And part of putting the listing up on the MLS is to write a really good description, showcasing all the attributes of the property, making sure you list of the upgrades, everything that this particular property could use in order to sell. So writing descriptions is absolutely key when you are a listing coordinator. Thankfully, nowadays we have a ton of AI tools that we can use in order to create a very professional and enticing type of description. Now, I wanted to give you a word of caution. I use ChatGPT and Gemini a lot. English is not my first language, so sometimes it is, very beneficial for me to run whatever I write through ChatGPT, for example, and make sure that what I write makes sense, right? Make sure that I get a revised and improved version of what I already draft. However, I think as well that it's very important for you to draft the first version, because only you know what exactly are the attributes of this property. Only you know what are the highlights that you want to include. And then feel free to get a better version and tweak it as you need. But just don't use like a raw version from ChatGPT, because normally they sound very, very generic and people can tell. Now, in order to write the first draft of this description, obviously you will have to be somehow familiar with the property. I also understand that we virtual assistants, we are remote, we never visit the property. And in these cases, you will have to rely on the information given by the seller and on the photos of the property. Now, talking about photos, you as a listing coordinator will be in charge of coordinating between the seller and the photographer. But your job doesn't end right there. Remember, the sellers normally don't sell houses often enough to be expert or to know what to expect, but you do. So make sure that you give them information on how to get ready for this photo shoot. For example, make sure you explain that it's super recommendable to have the house deep clean. Also, that is beneficial to declutter the house. The less things they have in the counters or around, the better. And make sure you mention as well that for the day of the shooting, no cars should be on the driveway. And if they have pets, they need to put them away so the photographer can access to every single room of the house. It is also a good idea to have this conversation over the phone and follow it up with an email where you listed all these, important recommendations for them to read later, and don't forget about anything. Now that you have your photos, the description, and you confirm all the information with the seller, then it's time for the listing agent and the seller to approve the draft of the MLS listing. And once that they approve it and they give you the okay, then you are good to go live. But there is one more step that you need to follow right after you hit submit, which is set up the showings. Now, when it comes to showings, there are many different scenarios that could happen. For example, if the house is vacant, that's an easy one. It is normally an option for go and show. But the properties are not always vacant. In the case that the property is occupied, most of the times the sellers are going to actually be the ones who approve or decline the showings based on their availability. And you can set all that up using, showing time or whatever other application your MLS offer. Keep in mind that you are not the person who takes care of approving or declining showings. But that doesn't end in here. There is more to the list. But before we continue, if you're finding value in this video, please like and subscribe. So other things that you're definitely going to do for your listing agent is to coordinate open houses. In some cases, they already have the dates and times approved by the seller, but in some instances, they're going to ask you to coordinate directly with them. So once that you actually have these days and times, you can, put them as well on the MLS for everyone to know about the open house. Another thing that you should do is taking care of the HOA. In the case that the property is in an HOA or homeowners association community, then you need to make sure that you upload to the MLS not just the disclosures, but also the rules and regulations. In order to do that, you will have to contact the MLS and get those documents. While you are on the phone with them, make sure that you get the best contact information so you can list it as well on the MLS, and to confirm the fees, and if that association in particular requires an approval process for the potential buyer. Now, another thing that you will be responsible for is to change the status on the MLS from, for example, active to temporarily off the market, or from active to pending. Also, in some cases, you might be able to assist with paperwork in the case that this listing agreement needs a modification of any type. Now, in that case, please, before you do that, check with your own state for regulations and check with the particular broker to make sure that as a listing coordinator, you're able to do that. So in a nutshell, that is the role of a listing coordinator. Obviously, there might be other things that you might perform already for your listing agents, or might be things that you are like, this is not included in my services. And that is perfectly fine, because as you know, you are a business owner and you get to choose the services that you offer. This is just a guide for you to have an idea. So please let me know in the comments if you are already a listing coordinator and how you handle your clients and what type of services you offer. Also, if you have any questions, they're always welcome. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you on the next one.